I think one of the keys to happiness in anything in life is to have low expectations. And my expectations don't get set much lower than buying a $33 camera lens off Amazon. So when the lens arrived, I was going to be surprised if it even worked. And not only does it work, it's actually quite a fun and interesting lens. And although the optical performance isn't going to compete with a Sony G Master lens or a Fuji made lens, it's actually a super fun lens and has some interesting optical characters. Now, the first thing you're going to notice when you take the lens out of the box is how solid it is. It is an all metal lens based on a metal lens mount. And the aperture ring and focus ring are super, super smooth. Now, I will say that the lenses that I will link below look a little bit different than the one that I actually bought. I thought I was being clever and I bought this one that has a screw mount that allows you to screw it into an adapter that allows me to change it from different camera systems. So I could use it on maybe a Sony mount, Micro Four Thirds, Fuji mount. It's not a very good setup. And in retrospect, I wish I would have bought just the direct built-in lens mount for the camera that I wanted to use it on, because this thing kind of turns and it's a bit messy. So I would recommend buying the direct mount. Now, the other thing is the particular model I bought was by a company called Rye Spray. I can't even find this company on Amazon right now. So I've linked these other lenses, which are the identical optical design. It looks like that these lenses are made by some third party and then other companies just slap their brand on it. They're all the same optical design, which is like 4 elements in 4 groups. It is a super, super simple lens. The lens itself is a 35mm f1.6 lens. So in theory, this should be a good lens in low light because it opens to f1.6. It's also going to give you a much more blurry background than maybe a kit lens that came with your camera. So there is that advantage. $33, you're going to get better low light and you're going to get a more blurry background than you might with the kit lens that you've already got. The one thing that you do need to know is this lens has some crazy optical features and performance, which are flaws, but they are very interesting flaws. And the first one I want to tell you about is when you take any photo or video, the entire outside edge of frame is going to be blurry. And it reminds me of a look that you don't see it so much anymore, but years ago, photographers used to put a filter on their lens, their good, high quality, very sharp lens, and then take some Vaseline and smear it around the outside edge of the frame. And what that would do is it would give soft edges of the frame to draw the viewer's eye to whatever is in the center of frame. This is a little bit different than using bokeh or shallow depth of field to get a blurry background, because the things on the edge of frame, even if they're at the same focal plane as the person that you're taking a photo of, they become blurry or out of focus. And this just helps further draw the viewer's eye to the thing that's in the center of frame. This lens exhibits those optical traits. Once again, this is considered a huge flaw, but for $33, it's kind of a cool and interesting look. And there's a company out there called Lens Baby that makes lenses that kind of give you this look, and they're a heck of a lot more expensive than $33. The other thing this lens does is it exhibits extremely heavy vignette, and that is darkening of the corners and the side of frame, particularly wide open. But once again, this works with those blurry edges of frame to draw the viewer's eye to whatever you've put in the center of frame. It might be an object, might be food, might be a person. This is kind of a subject type lens. It allows you to isolate that person or thing in the center of frame. And now we've got dark edges at f1.6. We've got blurry edges at f1.6. We're really drawing the viewer's eye to what's in the center of frame. Now, importantly, once we've done that, the question is, how sharp is that image in the center of frame? And I would say surprisingly sharp, particularly for the price point. Starting at f1.6, which is the maximum aperture on this lens, the center of frame is acceptably sharp, but kind of verging on dreamy. So it's going to be great for portraits where you got somebody, you want to hide some wrinkles, you want to hide some pores, you just want kind of a little bit of a softer look on someone's skin. This is going to give you that look. Importantly, wide open, there isn't a whole lot of chromatic aberration on contrasting edges, so you're not going to get some distracting purple fringing. You're just going to get a little bit of low contrast and a little bit of a softer image. But if you stop this lens down to f2 or f2.8, the lens gets quite acceptably sharp, so much so that whatever is in the middle of frame could really be used for proper professional photography, product photography, what have you. But because we've got this darkening of the edges and because we've got this blurry fall off on the side of frame, unlike most other lenses out there, when you stop them down, everything becomes more clear. And this starts to draw the viewer's eye to potentially the things in the corner and the side of frame, taking the attention away from the thing in the center of frame. Because we have this effect, this optical imperfection, you can stop the lens down to f2, f2.8, still get something in the center of frame that's sharp and detailed, but still have this isolation where the edges of frame are dark and blurry, drawing the viewer's eye to what you're taking a photo of. The other thing this lens does surprisingly well, and something that I really don't generally see from inexpensive lenses, even lenses under $100 often, is it has excellent close-up image quality. Now, the minimum focus distance is a bit further back than I would ideally like, but when you shoot this lens close up, you get a ton of detail in the shot, and I would say that the detail is just as good as things that are out a few meters away or at infinity distance, which isn't always the case with cheap lenses like this. In addition to that, you can probably shoot that close-up thing, whether it be food or an object, at possibly, toy photography might be another fun one that this would work for. Shoot it at f2.8, something like that. You're going to get a sharp and detailed thing in the center of frame. You're still going to get a blurry background because you're very close to your subject. The closer you are to your subject, the more blurry the background becomes. But you've also got that edge of frame softness, which is drawing the attention to that subject, food, toy, product, whatever that's in the center of frame. Now, the one optical imperfection in this lens that can be a real problem at times it looks really cool, but at other times it's really challenging and can completely ruin your photos, and that is flare. I think this might only be a single coated lens or something about the lens coatings. Doing high quality lens coatings is a big part of resisting flare in lenses. And it's also a very expensive part. And I think that's a place that they, really haven't had the budget to spend on a $33 lens. And because of that, often I'm not even sure where the light is coming from at times, and I'm getting this crazy washed out desaturation. Now, depending on how strong that flare is, sometimes it gives you this really cool, somewhat faded vintage film or old movie look, but sometimes it will just almost completely wash out the entire image. So you really have to be careful with the flare and your image composition. It's definitely a creative thing that you can kind of make work for you. But if I'm looking at all the different optical traits on the lens from a clinical perspective, the flare performance is by far the worst trait. But probably the coolest thing about this lens is it's just a fun little $33 lens that sometimes I just like to get cheap stuff and see what I can do with it. Like, how good can I make this photo? Or even take a photo or video and show it to somebody and they go, oh, that's great. And they go, would you believe it's a $33 lens? So I think that challenge and that adventure of taking something that's ultra cheap and making something beautiful with it is kind of one of the most fun things that I do. And a lot of, to a larger extent, that's what this channel's about, is creating beautiful things with cheap gear. So even if you already have a 35mm focal length, at $33, this is kind of a fun, creative challenge that I can highly recommend. Now, once again, I'll put those links in the description down below, broken down by the different mounts. And if you're interested in some more super ultra budget lenses for APS-C sensor cameras, I've just thrown a video on screen now. That is my ultra budget APS-C lens video. And there's probably some lenses in there that you don't know about either.